Williamsburg City Council will come to order. Ms. Burcham, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Maslin?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Freiling?
Here.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Here.
Mr. Zhang?
Here.
Before us, we have the council meeting minutes from June 13 and July 11, 2019. Do we have any edits?
I move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
We have no matters of special privilege on the agenda, but I would like to take this opportunity to ask Chief Dunn if he would, you don't have to say anything, sir, unless you want to, if he'd be so kind as to pass along to the entire police department, city councils and the entire city's appreciation for a terrific national night out this past Tuesday evening at High Street. It seemed like it went extremely well, very large crowd, and we just appreciate all the effort that the entire force puts into that evening to help connect with the community.
Well, Mayor, I sure do appreciate it, and I would just like to say on behalf of the police department, every single council member was there, and I think that's pretty incredible. So thank you all very much for the support, really.
Thank you, Chief. We have no public hearings today, so we will move right into reports, the first of which is the monthly financial statement. Mr. Trivette, anything you want to highlight there?
Just briefly, the financial statement is pretty consistent with what we would expect. The sales tax revenue has rebounded back to its unexpected numbers of about 30% greater than what it has been, which indicates that at some point in the future we may have yet another large payout to make. Ms. Dameron, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing I'll say are there's some timing differences where it appears that we have a larger pool from reserves. That's due to some of the timing differences, and that will clear up in the next month. So for an example, in revenues, it would appear that we're $35,000 less than where we were at last year. Last year at this time, we showed $122,000 revenue for the $2 lodging tax that later on we adjusted to go to the tourism fund. When I make that adjustment in the comparison, we're actually $86,000 better. Same thing with expenditures. It appears that we have higher expenditures, but about $280,000 of that's really timing differences.
Thank you, Ms. Dameron. Any questions? Yes, sir. Monthly departmental operating reports, Mr. Trivette.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So last month we mentioned that we were going to start doing something a little bit different with the departmental operating reports when time allows. And today we're going to have the police department talk about what's featured in their monthly operating report. And the chief will be assisted by Mr. Barham, who will help us illustrate the differences between what we had in a former software and what is now offered through our partnership with My Sidewalk. Chief?
Thank you. The city manager felt like I didn't have enough going on this week, so he went. No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This is an opportunity for us to communicate both internally and externally with kind of what's going on with the police department. So if you'll see, slide 1 here talks about response times. Broken down per month going back several years. Our response time in July of last month, so pretty up-to-date information, was 4.6 minutes. Up slightly, up a little bit, but that's compared to a community that for years we've had a very, very swift response time, and so 4.6 minutes certainly isn't that bad, but it is certainly one of those areas that we would like to see improved upon. Total calls for service, again, another great metric that I think for us to share with our community. July of 2019, last month, 3,438 calls for service. Down slightly from the month prior, but again, if you look at the range, you see not too far off. This includes all calls for service from our community and includes traffic stops and officer type messages that are captured through our computer-aided dispatch.
Chief,
yes, sir.
Those numbers are the same, are they not? 34.
Yes, sir. Okay, so let me explain that. Can you bring it down just a hair?
Yep.
The July of 2019 number of 3,438 to the left, and then the year-to-date 2020 3,438. That's just capturing this month, July. So the number on the left, July of 2019, next month, that will be August 2019, and so that will be just for the month of August, whereby the year-to-date number will will continue to contain that 3438 plus whatever we pick up in August.
Just
Great
coincidental.
question. Yeah, it looks kind of odd this month, but as we move forward, I think it'll make more sense.
That's a fiscal year indicator, so
Right.
it'll roll as we continue.
And one thing that the chief said, but it's an important distinction that I think we've sort of rolled over, is 3,438 calls for service sounds like a lot, right? And he said it includes traffic stops and things like that, but it also includes the times when the officer calls dispatch for assistance with information, or it may not necessarily be a traffic stop. It could be some other issue, right, Chief?
Yeah, it really accounts for all the different types of calls and issues that take the officer's time, all included. Anything that's captured through our computer-aided dispatch, through our CAD system. So yeah, great point. Part 1 offenses, 26 for July, and again, the year-to-date number, 26 for the fiscal year as well. And as you can see, month to month, we're up and down a little bit. This year, we're down a little bit from last month, and we're down a little bit from a year ago, July of 2018 as well. But as you can see, some months we're up a little, some months we're down a little. Overall, we are a very, very, very safe community, and so having a few incidents more or less each month may look somewhat dramatic in a graph like this, but it really does. I think it's an indicator of what a safe community we are with very low crime. For Part 1 offenses, so not all offenses, but just Part 1 offenses, which are murder, robbery, burglary, larceny, that sort of thing. In July, we made 12, and again, you can see the range going back to July of 2015. Some months were a little higher, some months were a little bit lower. But again, these are arrests for Part 1 offenses. What these don't include are things, Part 1 offense does not include like drug arrest or just simple assaults or those other types of things. Part 1 crime are those crimes that it's our best opportunity to do an apples-to-apples comparison, I think, of the safety of a community. And so that's why we really look hard at the Part 1 offenses. Clearance rate, this is a percentage. So for July of 2019, our clearance rate for Part 1 offenses, those offenses we just described, was 46%. For many, many years, Williamsburg's been above average with our clearance rates, and 46% I think is a pretty good rate to be at. So. Accidents, as you might imagine, we do have quite a bit of traffic in the city, and so with that, we have a number of accidents. So July, we had 20 accidents, and as you can see, not too far off course. I mean, some months were remarkably low, some months were a little bit high, but for the most part, I feel like we're pretty average in July of this year. So, Prince George parking garage. As you can see, January was our dip. Not only is that, seasonally probably somewhat consistent, but also with the transition of our equipment, we would have also experienced a dip with that. But we are up to 9,989 vehicles utilizing the Prince George parking garage. So for the past several months, we've been in a bit of an incline. I hope that incline continues. And things seem to be going much better with our new technology at the garage. So I think we're looking pretty good there.
Is that it?
That's it. Yes, sir.
Mr. Barham, when you have the opportunity at some point, could you look at some of the underlying data and make sure that it's just interesting that all of these numbers exactly correlate? Perhaps this July was very similar to last July, but just make sure that, to even be down to the same number of vehicles utilizing the Prince George parking garage.
This is for this year.
This is the first month of this fiscal year.
So this is FY '20.
Right.
So it's the first month of this fiscal year.
Right,
Which is July.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right,
I see.
and just to clear this up, the number on the left is for the current month,
Okay.
and the number on the right is the year-to-date number. But because this is the first month of the new fiscal year, this is a fiscal indicator, because this is the first month of the fiscal year, they are always going to be the same number in July. Next month, this one will be different, and this one will be this number plus whatever it was for August over here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions for the chief?
One question, how are we doing our trending for pedestrian injuries? I know there have been some initiatives to, reduce the pedestrian.
Yeah, we had a period of several months where we had a bit of a spike, and the past few months that things have been much better. But of course, as our pedestrian activity increases here in the next couple of months, it's something we're going to be paying very close attention to. So,
You want to say?
Yeah, I can. We've made some substantial improvements. We replaced all the lighting fixtures on Richmond Road in the section from Monticello to College Corner with LED bulbs, and so increased the foot candles per inch of sidewalk. So that should increase visibility a little bit. And the college has actually taken on some initiatives too. They have installed beacon-style sidewalks and crosswalks on both Richmond Road and Jamestown Road. The project on Jamestown is complete, and Richmond Road is in the process of being completed right now. I think that they expected it to be done by next week for sure. And then the city partnered with the college to do a new sidewalk on South Henry Street, adjacent to the law school. And so all of those were geared toward reducing the number of collisions that we experienced. Of course, in the last few months, the students have been gone, so I don't know that it's fair to say that any of that has had an impact yet. We'll see what happens as the school year starts.
And there's also the crosswalk on South Henry Street that's new, connecting to that sidewalk.
Right,
And
that's
the
right.
clearing of the bike lane is a nice extension too.
Yes, we eliminated some parking to increase visibility as people made the turn. So we're keeping a close eye on it. If the improvement to the lighting on Richmond Road has the impact that we hope in terms of visibility, we have a project planned for Jamestown Road to do the same thing.
It's safe to assume that the enhancements that we're making with lighting and crosswalks and partnering with the college is where the incidents typically happen.
Yes.
Yeah, especially for the law school and I appreciate staff's help and collaborative efforts with the deans over there, but there was a significant incident regarding, a student, and maybe there were a couple of close calls that hopefully now we can ensure that there's going to be a safe pedestrian activity.
One thing probably to note is that, this work represents a partnership not only between the city and the college, but also the city and the student council, who actually brought this issue and some of these suggested improvements to our attention, and we acted on them within the year. A good example of that is that Mr. Clayton worked with the college to reinstall lighting closer to College Corner and really improved visibility, at least right there, which obviously is a crucial intersection for us.
And did the student assembly help with some of the funding?
They did, particularly on the crosswalks that are being installed with beacons by the university itself. There's some cost sharing there. I couldn't tell you the exact numbers, but the student assembly did contribute considerably to the cost of that installation.
That's really a remarkable partnership. So thanks for continuing to pursue that.
One other suggestion, in terms of staff that's meeting with the new students during orientation week, if there's going to be some, education on that, because a lot of people may think that they're in a crosswalk, they're safe.
Sure.
And they're not walking defensively, especially, on Richmond Road coming, through those brick walls, and it's like drivers may not even see them.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on operating reports?
No, sir.
City manager report?
There isn't one. Thank you.
City attorney report?
Nothing.
Unfinished business? None? So we have plenty of new business today. The first item is the consideration and authorization to execute the comprehensive agreement for Monticello Avenue PPTA. Mr. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before you today is the consideration of a PPTA, Comprehensive Agreement for the Monticello Avenue Improvements Project. This project is a reconfiguration of the streetscape between Richmond Road and Trayburn Drive. It'll provide for on-street parking, turn lanes, landscaping, a multi-use trail, and a protected bicycle lane, signal modifications, sidewalks, LED streetlights, and pedestrian safety measures. The design is in conjunction with the redevelopment of the Midtown area and the former Monticello and Williamsburg shopping centers. This cross-section illustrates many features originally identified in the public design charrette the city held in September of 2017. In November of 2017, Henderson Inc. and their design build team submitted an unsolicited PPTA proposal to design and construct this project. Following the PPTA guidelines, The project proceeded to solicit competing teams, and in November 2018, council decided to proceed with the Henderson proposal. Due to the uncertainty with many of the design aspects and the utilities in the area at the time, staff recommended and council agreed to proceed with an interim agreement for the design phase only at a cost of $269,601. The interim agreement allowed for development of a detailed roadway design, utility coordination, and refined cost estimates for that construction. That design is now complete, and I've got a few slides here to kind of walk us through from one end of the project through the other. This first section is from Trayburn Drive up to Mount Vernon Avenue, and the basic improvement here is going to be replacement of the current 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk with a 10-foot wide asphalt path. This will connect to the Monticello shared use path, which will be from Trayburn Drive all the way up to Ironbound. And so this will be a continuous, kind of a continuation of that project. And that project, we're just awaiting for federal approval to advertise for construction. The next, and that brings us all the way up to Mount Vernon Avenue. We will also overlay and repave the street through this area. And gets us up to Mount Vernon Avenue, where we will continue that path across the street along the frontage of the William & Mary parking lot. We'll also be replacing and installing some new streetlights in this area, because as you know, the streetlight system kind of stops right there at Mount Vernon Avenue, and we'll be continuing that down the street, so it'll get rid of that dark spot down to Trayburn Drive. This is probably the most interesting section, which is kind of between Mount Vernon Avenue up to Garrison Drive. And what you have here is a new intersection. This is a relocation of the current traffic signal from the shopping center. We're moving it a little further to the east, so it'll be aligned with the new private street in the development called College Row. And it'll also be a little closer to the Rita's Water Ice store as well. So that'll kind of help clean up some of their parking issues that they have in the shopping center. The parking will also shift back, and we're going to add a right turn lane coming from Richmond Road to enter into the parking lot. What that allows is parking or traffic that's trying to turn into the shopping center, and that gets them out of the travel way so that we can actually have more throughput for vehicles traveling towards James City County. We also have a bus pullout for the WRHA buses, and that'll be on the, call it the downstream side, further west of the new traffic signal. And so the buses will be able to, once they're through the signal, they'll be able to pull completely out of the travel lane. There'll be a bus shelter there, not just a bench as we currently have. As well as bike racks and all the amenities similar to the one we have over on Richmond Road. And that will be the main bus stop to service the apartments at Midtown Row, as well as all of the other area surrounding it. And then that'll allow the buses to completely pull out of the way and not block up the throughput of the traffic traveling to the west. On the eastbound side, we will also have that continuous two-way left turn lane and turn lanes into the shopping centers. But on the south side, we will have a protected bike lane that'll be continued once we get along the frontage of Midtown Row. It will be a 8-foot wide of asphalt, plus you'll have the overhang of the curb and gutter to give you basically 10-foot clearance. Then there'll be a small buffer strip, which will have bollards between it and a parking lane, which you see in the orange color. That'll allow parallel parking along that side of the road. So the bike path will actually be completely separated off. We are showing it in green because the proposal right now is for what's called a right-of-way colorized, basically traffic paint that'll have green pavement so that you'll see it. Makes it very visible, that it's very obvious to pedestrians who are moving from the crossing from the parking lanes over to the sidewalks, as well as other vehicles to know that this is truly meant to be a bicycle travel lane. And then the other big feature here is right at the intersection, you'll notice the kind of red brick crosswalks. Those are actually going to be a stamped asphalt product, very similar to the crosswalks you have at Monticello Avenue and Ironbound Road out in James City County, right near the courthouse. Those hold up a little better than an actual brick paver because it's just pressed into the asphalt. It's a smoother ride as you go across it, and you don't have the chance of the bricks settling and moving. And also when it comes to repaving, we can mill right through it and reinstall those at a later date as part of that work. The other big feature is the wider sidewalks up against the buildings of Midtown Row. We'll be installing those. There'll be a wide, 6-foot wide area for the landscape trees, as well as a 5-foot public sidewalk, but then there'll be other sidewalks that'll be constructed as part of Midtown Row. The final section that I want to show you is the area between Garrison Drive and Richmond Road. This is right now, we have currently a left turn lane that's pretty short, a straight through lane, and a very short taper for the right turn. We'll be widening this out to provide a double left turn. It's still kind of short, but it still works really well. A full through lane and a full right turn lane, as well as the bicycle lanes. So we've got plenty of room to turn in and out. So we'll be reconfiguring the signal at this area to provide for the double lefts. A lot of the other approaches coming from the north and the south on Richmond Road will also be adding the flashing yellow arrow, which we will also have at the new shopping center signal to allow for turns. The other thing that we will be doing as part of the project is the sidewalk along Richmond Road on the Midtown Road side and along their frontage. We'll be replacing the 5-foot wide sidewalk with a 10-foot wide concrete sidewalk. So it'll also double as a shared use path between Monticello Avenue and the basically down to Bacon Avenue, where you can then pick up the Sharrows heading into town. Now that we've completed the design work on the interim agreement, staff now recommends that council proceed with the PPTA comprehensive agreement with Henderson Inc. to construct the project. The total cost is $3,850,113.63 and will include construction of the elements shown on the plans and incorporates the cost of that interim agreement. Approximately $525,000 of the total cost is for allowances for such uncertain items such as utility relocation cost, the streetlight cost, and unsuitable soils. We also have $157,000 as part of that allowances is included for streetscape improvements adjacent to the Midtown Row buildings, such as sidewalks, street furniture, and landscaping that we don't want to install necessarily early on because they could be damaged by the building construction. So some of that work will be worked with Henderson either as a later contract or with Broad Street and their site contractor. The PPTA comprehensive agreement included in your packets, it mimics the PPEA agreement that the city used for the Stryker building construction, which was very successfully employed without really any contractual issues. Construction funds are available in the city CIP budget for the project. Henderson expects to start the work after Labor Day and be completed next summer, approximately 6 months before the first buildings in Midtown Row will be finished. So I would be happy to answer any questions you may have, and we also have representatives from Henderson here in the audience.
Questions?
Yeah, thank you. Aaron, I appreciate the work on this, and certainly fully support the process that got us here and the pricing and certainly the contractor. Be remiss if I didn't say that I'm still concerned about the parallel parking, I guess, on the south side, and if you can go back to that image, that'd be helpful. You know, we're allowing for the left turn lane into the Monticello Shopping Center, which I think, to your point, allows for that throughput to continue. But I can imagine there'll be as much or maybe more traffic wanting to turn right, perhaps onto College Row, and without that turn lane, how successful would that throughput traffic be if it's blocked up there or creates a bottleneck? And so that's a concern, and you're the expert, and we probably had some design engineers help with this traffic.
We have looked at the traffic issues on that, and a lot of the throughput, a lot of the current issues that we have along Monticello Avenue are actually due to the traffic signals not being synced up and working with each other. And part of this project also includes the infrastructure so that the three signals, our Richmond Road signal, our College Row signal, and also VDOT's signal at Trayburn Drive will actually be synced to operate and time to work with each other. Good. Using different timing programs throughout the day.
And so then you also described bollards.
Yes.
Single post along
Yeah.
between the I guess what would be the parallel parking and the green pedestrian bike pass.
That's correct. And these are bollards at about 42 to 48 inches tall. They're visible in a rear view mirror, right, so that you can see them. They're also going to be lit with LED lights so that they'll be, you know, kind of add to the ambiance of the whole streetscape.
Well, and I think the design, you know, certainly works towards that pedestrian feel that I think we all aspire to with the renovations that have happened at Monticello, what's happening at Midtown Row, you know, that all becomes, you know, one mixed-use development. And so that makes sense. Again, the concern is, you know, if it doesn't work out for traffic. And if it doesn't, what are our options beyond that?
We do have a backup plan. One of the things we've looked at when we looked at the street widths is we could, if it doesn't work out and the parallel parking is causing more problems than it's solving, one thing we can do is restripe and make that parallel parking lane into a through lane. And it'll actually will then have two through lanes coming in. And so you can see that actually that through lane would then blend right into the right turn lane onto Richmond Road.
Good.
So we have a backup plan.
All right. Good. I knew you did. The only other concern or thought I think we ought to address is on the Richmond Road side in front of the Midtown Road Shopping Center.
Yes.
There's a bus stop there that doesn't have a pull-off for the bus. And that creates, you know, I think a lot of problems. Currently, it doesn't allow, you know, people tend to drive around it.
Right.
They don't see pedestrians in a crosswalk, which is just
We did
before
look
that.
at that. However, in order to do that and those infrastructure changes, there's also a transformer located right there. So there's a lot of other infrastructure, telephone, cable, and, you know, all the utility infrastructure that's there that's kind of in the way. Plus, we've got the huge trees right there at the bus stop. And so it was one of those, it would solve it.
Sure.
But it would be,
I'm a firm
it'd be
believer
expensive in order to do it.
Yeah. Well, could you shift it further west so that it's not where it currently is, and so that you avoid the hard cost of some of the utilities? I'm a believer that trees can be replaced. And so I'm not so concerned about that. I know a lot of people are, but probably get some hate mail now. But could you move it further towards the intersection to avoid some of that stuff?
I'd have to look into that.
I'd appreciate it.
Trees are easier to replace than people.
That's right.
Thank you, Aaron, for your informative presentations. We've had a lot of conversations getting up to this point, so it must be really exciting for the team and also for the contractors who put in the PPTA bid. In terms of the traffic lights, syncing them up, that technology, is that something we're trying to seek with state or federal grants, or is that something we're just going to eat up?
On this particular project, we're actually just, technology has changed. It used to be that you actually had to run a wire or a fiber optic cable between each of the signals in order to get them to sync up properly.
Sure.
These days, what you do is you set up what's called a timing program. And then, so we all know the timing program at 2 o'clock, we turn it to change to this sequencing of operations. And then at 6 p.m., we change to this sequence of operations.
Right.
But the problem is the clocks inside the most traffic signals are not that accurate because they're drawing their clock timing based on the power coming to the signal. And the power can vary somewhat in
Sure.
terms of the timing. So that throws the clocks off.
Right.
Well, what we do is now we can install these GPS modules inside the traffic signal, and so that once a day, it calls up to the satellite system and says, what time is it?
Wow.
So what it is the traffic signals are actually syncing their watches. And that's what we really want to happen so that they all work together. If they're off by even 10 seconds, that throws everything off.
Especially from like a rush hour standpoint.
Exactly.
It's
People
incredibly
don't think
inefficient.
about that, but 10 seconds
Oh,
can
yeah.
really, it makes you stumble. It's as if when you're walking along and all of a sudden your gait has to change.
And I asked that question, and I'm assuming that technology's obviously we budgeted well, and technology in certain aspects have become cheaper now that more and more localities are using it. I'm just aware we've received grants for like HSIP, traffic,
We
which is a
have
little
for
bit
the
different.
rest of our signals on Richmond Road
Sure.
as part of that project, but not for this one.
Yeah.
This one we're actually going to use the
Cool.
cities.
Very cool. Just wanted to clarify that because I know at certain points we always, we would seek these grants, and
I
sometimes
always
we'll
try to
find-
seek
Absolutely,
somebody
I know
else's
we do
money
very
first.
well. That's right. My only other questions to follow up from Mr. Pons which is with our backup plan. I guess this is more of a question for Ms. Shelton, but in terms of the contract, does that require any stipulation that if we decide to change, to that backup plan with the restriping, is there any contractual stipulation we have to be aware of, or
I
that's
don't
just kind
think
of
that's in the scope of work. I think what I'm hearing is the plan is to see if the parallel parking works, and if the parallel parking
you make a
doesn't work,
decision call to just
then it would
restripe
be a
it?
decision to
Yeah,
later
it would
change
be
it.
it would be just a simple matter of restriping, which is not that expensive.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you for due diligence with PPTA, and I just have a couple questions. Most of mine have already been answered by Mr. Pons and
I've read her
Mr.
sheet.
Zhang. What?
I read your sheet.
But I assume that the yellow sort of curved line on that is drawing is the bus stop, right?
Yes.
So is there going to be a bus stop on the other side, or how?
No, the current routing of WRHA does not have a bus that runs along eastbound Monticello. This is along the red line, I believe it is, and that bus actually comes down Monticello coming out of Newtown and turns left onto Ironbound Road. So it's coming around over by Ironbound Long Hill area, up by the Aldi's, and comes down Richmond Road that way. They had not expressed, if they had to change their bus routes around and that we had an eastbound bus here, that would, they'd lose a lot of customers over on that edge of the route.
So anyone who's living in those apartments, once they're constructed and wants to take the bus, would pick up the bus at Richmond
They could either
Road?
pick it up here, heading
But if
towards
they're coming in
Newtown,
town.
or they walk over to the Richmond Road to head into Williamsburg. So
Okay.
they can go in either direction from either one of those buses.
And along with the synchronization of the lights, all of those new traffic signals will have the flashing left turn light. Is that correct?
Where appropriate. I mean, obviously, coming off of Monticello Avenue, where we have the double left here,
Mm-hmm.
cannot have a flashing yellow in that direction.
Because
So-
of the amount of traffic?
Because there's two of them.
Right.
So you can only do it for the single turn lanes. I believe we will have it for the north on Richmond Road, north and south on Richmond Road.
Okay. And then the shared use path on Richmond Road that
Yes.
will go in front, that will be, I think you said, a 10-foot wide sidewalk. and
10-foot wide concrete.
Concrete. So if someone is biking in that area, will they be on that path, or will they still be on the road?
We would actually, we have anticipated that they would be on the bikeway, the path. itself, the sidewalk.
And then,
The reason is because it's just not enough room to, we didn't have enough room to delineate a bike lane within Richmond Road without additional improvements.
and then hope that they get off of that and get on the bike lane when it
Right at the
actually is.
entrance. It's right at the entrance, right
Oh.
down where the old bank used to be.
Okay. So I don't have any other questions. Thank you very much.
Two questions. I've always had concerns about the parallel parking since the charrette, the original charrette. Can we start off with parking spaces that are a little longer than the typical parallel parking so people don't have to back into them? Because I'm not sure we even, for our driver's licenses, DMV even practices parallel parking.
I could talk with planning about it to see how many spaces we could fit in there. But it would, by going longer, you do reduce the number of spaces.
But it means you're not going to be stopping traffic.
I understand.
Well, the second thing, so I've had conversations before with staff in terms of some of the documents. Were we able to work through those questions?
I think the only question that we didn't get answered was relative to the number of days and for conclusion of the project.
As far as the conclusion of the project.
Yep.
And what it is the way the contract's written, we can, final completion is 30 days after the, substantial, except when you're in that time frame when substantial completion is close to its end date. So what we're going to do is just change the final completion to be 334 days after start.
That's good. Thank you.
Make it consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple more questions, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
The bollards that separate the bicycle lane from the parallel parking lane, are those flexible?
No, they're not.
Oh,
They're aluminum.
Don't hit them.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
And-
they're,
They don't go down.
No.
no,
Once
they
they're
don't
in place,
retract.
they
They're
don't retract.
And does-
locked in place and they have a light at the top.
and
Yeah,
the- and the-
but they are made so that if they are hit, similar to almost all the other electrical features that are in the right-of-way, they have spring-loaded fuses so that there's not going to be live wires if you hit. But we expect to be replacing a few bollards here and there.
And I don't mean to get into the details, but I'm just thinking about if I'm ever going to try to parallel park on this section of Monticello Avenue. Are the bollards, because it's in a 2 to 3 foot wide?
It's in a 3-foot wide buffer zone.
Right.
And there's actually a buffer zone between the edge of the parking space and the travel lane. So there's actually a second buffer zone. If we go back to the cross section, you have the bike lane, then we have a 3-foot buffer zone where the bollard is. Then we have our parking lane, which I believe is 7 or 8 feet.
It says 7 on here.
And it's 7 there, but it may be 8 feet in the plans. And then we have another buffer zone of 2 feet before we get to the travel lane, which is 12 feet.
And those 2 buffer lanes also help with opening car doors?
They allow for car swing, they allow for a lot more safety and a lot of other features.
And if the mayor's trying to parallel park.
And, yeah, saving from the bollards.
Going back to the $500 and some $1,000 in
Yes.
allowances,
In allowances.
what if that number's too low? Does our cost go up?
Well, then, we really doubt it is. Those are what's allowed in the contract as maximums. Anything above that, we would go through the change order process. And that would follow along the same normal, standard way we do change orders, in procurement.
And when we did Stryker construction, my recollection is that the city hired, and I don't know the right term, a construction manager, an independent observer on site who was an engineer in the construction business and was looking out for our interests in that project. Is there any intention of doing that here, or is that staff's responsibility?
No, we're gonna do this in-house with our staff. And the reason is, we've got good experience doing construction projects on roadways. Where the Stryker Center differs is there's a lot of complex systems in a building system that you don't necessarily have good experience in-house on.
Okay. And could we go back to the slide that shows the double left turn from Monticello onto Richmond? I'm not, like Mr. Pons, I'm not trying to get into your engineering world or traffic engineering, but how long is that shorter second left turn? How many cars can stack in there?
About 3 or 4.
Because I could easily see.
Yeah, you're not looking at a lot,
Yeah.
but if you compare to what we have now, right now, the left turn lane, turning onto Richmond Road, you can only hold maybe 6 cars altogether. This will improve that drastically
Well, the
because
reason
they're not also getting out to get into that through lane.
The reason I asked that question is it's that one car.
It's always the one car.
The fourth car in the right side, left-hand turn lane, that if it decides not to go into the other left, which actually, it's not staying in your lane, you have to get over and deviate. If they decide to stay in the lane, you end up losing those.
Yeah, that's the issue with double lefts, but the intent here was to provide more capacity than we have now.
Well, even just getting the extended right-hand turn lane will be an enormous improvement.
Oh, yes.
At that intersection. And I have one more question that may be for Mr. Trivette. Could you just give us a brief recap in general terms of the funding source for the money that's going to make this project happen?
Sure, and that's really an easy question on this project. It's all local. We made that decision, I'm going to say 2 years ago. And the reason was because originally, when this project was first programmed, we did have a mix of funding from the state and the federal government. And as you know from projects in the past that include state or federal monies, that project takes infinitely longer because
As we've seen with the Monticello multi-use path.
Exactly.
Is a great example.
because you're at the mercy of the approving agencies before the funds can be released and spent. And so the decision was made to transfer this to local funding only so that we could match completion of the construction to as close as possible, Aaron, don't get too nervous, with the completion of Midtown Row.
I've got a 6-month buffer. So.
That's right.
And I might be off a little bit on the timing, but that multi-use path, I think we approved about 2 years ago,
It's
about somewhere around there. And this will be finished about the same time that will be.
Yes.
So I do have one other question. There's a helpful chart that shows the different stages and when they're going to be completed, the timeline.
Yes.
Is that possible to post somewhere for the public to have easy access to? Because I think that's the type of thing that people would have interest in if they're going through this area periodically.
I think that's probably possible.
Mr. Barham is nodding and winking affirmatively. The winking is unnerving, Mr. Barham. The nodding is appreciated.
And maybe find a way to make it a little more public or visible to people, because just in planning their trips, I think that would be helpful. Any other questions?
I just want, speaking of the timeline and the different phases, do you anticipate detours off of?
There is going to be periodic lane narrowing. I don't think we've got planned any road shutdowns. Other than the worst time is actually going to be when we're paving it towards the end, because the whole road is going to be a construction. But the current phasing plan has us starting. We will start at Garrison, between Garrison Drive and the new entrance, to get that new turn lane in for the shopping center on the Monticello side, and then we will shift that parking lot back. That gives us allows traffic into the new entrance while we're closing the old one and installing the bus at that point. Then we'll go around and fix all of the bike stuff, work up here in the Richmond Road area, and then finally in front of Midtown Row. A lot of it's going to depend on the traffic signal poles. As you remember from the Ironbound project, they take a long time.
And I'll pay a compliment to the staff. Our project management staff, Clark, is dedicated to this job, and he will be out there at all hours of construction, adjusting the traffic plan as needed if there's a problem observed. So,
Wonderful.
Thank you to the staff there.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, since you're still there, I want to go back to the Food Line bus stop.
Okay.
You said you'd take a look at it, but what does that really mean? If you look at it and it's deemed that we could do something, how does that fit into where we are with this PPTA?
Now depending on the cost and the changes, we would look to see, okay, is there an increase in the cost? And if it does end up increasing the cost, that would just go through the change order process.
At this stage in the project, we would go ahead and approve this as drafted, and then if we wanted to add that, it would be a change order.
Right.
Well, I can't let him ask the last question. On the Monticello Avenue bus stop that's currently there, there's a bench that was donated
That's
by
right.
the Williamsburg area
Yes.
realtors. That's going to be preserved and used in
Yes,
any way?
it'll be used elsewhere.
Thank you. Anything else?
There's no other discussion, I'll make a motion.
Please.
I move the city council authorize the city manager to execute the PPTA comprehensive agreement for the Monticello Avenue with Henderson, Inc.
Second.
Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Don't go anywhere, Mr. Small. We're coming right back to you. Next on our agenda is the consideration and authorization for award of bid for bridge maintenance at Bypass Road and Capitol Landing Road.
Thank you, sir. This next item is the award of a contract for maintenance on Bypass Road and Capitol Landing Road bridges over the CSX Railroad. The work was identified in our biennial inspections of the city's bridges. The work involves removing the wearing surface in the travel lanes and replacing with a waterproof epoxy surface. The existing surfaces are around 12 years old and are starting to chip and wear due to traffic and climatic erosion. Replacing the coating will prevent water from seeping through to the underlying structure, which prolongs the life of the bridge by keeping the water out. The work also includes the recoating of the metal rails at the Capitol Landing Road Bridge to also prevent that further corrosion. And you can see here, you can actually see the surface of the Bypass Road Bridge. You can see spots where the current wearing surface is chipping away, and you can see the underlying concrete surface there. These are from our actual inspection reports. It's not a structural problem, really, and there's actually, you can hardly feel it when you drive across it. It just feels a little rough. But it's one of those things where the waterproofing is actually more of what we're looking for here. The Capitol Landing Road has a similar issue. You see it's just kind of wearing away and chipping away in locations. The staff advertised the project in accordance with Virginia procurement requirements, and we received 3 bids for the project. Early Contracting Corp. was provided the lowest bid of $199,351. and has met all the conditions required. City staff contacted City of Newport News, who has used Early on other projects, and they were satisfied with their work product and had no contractual issues. So therefore, staff recommends award of the contract. Construction funds are available in the city's CIP budget for the project, and the work is expected to begin after Labor Day and to be completed by November of this year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
No, I certainly see that it's work that needs to be done, and I think, waterproofing them as best we can. Is anything ever really waterproof, and for how long? But I think that'd be a big help. Any way to let York County annex that part of Williamsburg so that the bridge actually falls under street maintenance?
It's right on the line.
Yeah. I have no other questions. Thank you.
And I support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And the only question I had is the division between the different bids seemed very significant. And my question had been whether you all had experience with Early contracting before, but it sounds like you've done some due diligence to check with Newport News and feel comfortable and confident about them doing the work.
Yes, we do. And this is actually, we originally advertised this project about 3 months ago to try to get the work done this summer. Bids came in higher than we expected. We have one common bidder. He lowered his bid a little bit, but I do not see, I think the bid that we've got from Early is a good one.
And you feel that that's a fair
And
price?
I feel confident. That's the price of what it would take to do the work.
Yep. Thank you.
Since the bid is based on unit prices, and we don't know the exact quantities at this point, is there enough allowance in the
Yes.
contract to cover? That's all I had.
Okay. Just curious. Well, first I want to say bridges all over this country
Yes.
are in various states of repair and disrepair, and it's going to be a major infrastructure issue for the entire nation. we have some other bridges in the city, although I'm not sure what gets classified as a bridge or when the other part is a tunnel, but Page Street is one that comes to mind. We have the bridges over the Parkway, which may actually be tunnels, depending upon how you describe it. What are the conditions of those?
Well, the only bridge over the Parkway that's actually ours is the one on Merrimack Trail, and it's in really good condition. It's just a brick facade, so when you look at it and you look at the condition of the brick, that's not the condition of the real bridge. The condition is actually the underlying concrete arch bridge, which is in great shape underneath it. The other bridges along the Parkway, Newport Avenue, including the tunnel, those are actually owned by the Park Service. And and Lafayette Street and the railroad, and they're actually in the process right now of putting together a contract for rehabilitation. And most of that work that they're doing on those is, it's just brick patching here and there, and they're still in good shape. The federal government does keep a log of all of these bridges, especially on the federal roads. Our bridges, I'd say the average is 7 to 8 out of 10. And the main reason some of those ages are there is because we've got a few little things like the epoxy surface that could use a little bit of work here and there. That's still in the good range. So all our bridges aren't even eligible for a lot of the funding programs that are out there. Our bridges are in fantastic shape.
So you don't anticipate the need to be coming back for additional bridge maintenance funding in the near term?
We always will be coming back. Maintenance is one of those things that will continue forever. Unless you want to replace the bridge. And if you want to replace it, then we talk big money.
Well, and then I was not to take the last word for you, but by spending this money and doing the maintenance,
Yeah, sure.
Keeps it from
Much better to
deteriorating.
do it now,
Right,
because you're preventing further deterioration of the underlying structure. Okay. And other than Page Street, are there other bridges?
Mm-hmm. We have bridges on Quarter Path Road. It's considered a bridge. I like to call them bridge culverts on South Henry Street, where we cross the creek down near the park. Of course, the Capitol Landing Road Bridge, the Bypass Road Bridge, Merrimack Trail, and Page Street. Those are the ones we maintain.
Do I hear a motion?
Yes, I move to award the bid and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Early Contracting Corporation for bridge maintenance at Bypass Road and Capitol Landing Road bridges in the amount of $199,351.
Second.
Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Small, I think you're free to go. Our next item of new business is a consideration and approval of proposed resolution 19-13 designating City Square as a public park. Mr. Trivette?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this item is really just sort of housekeeping in nature, as programming and improvements have increased to the area that we call City Square, which is the green in front of the community building and the plaza here in front of the Stryker Center. We decided that it would be best if we could regulate it as we do other parks. And so we would like to add it to the park system under the name of City Square, and that's what this resolution does.
So, I mean, apart from what is currently the status quo, it's a public space. So what does designating public park have anything to do, functionally?
Well, it falls under the chapter in the city code dealing with public parks. It clarifies what that space is.
Okay.
It gives the city manager and the parks director the opportunity to regulate it without having to come back to city council. So it gives it a structure legally that it doesn't currently have.
Because I was thinking, even if it were a public space, it would still have, let's say, First Amendment, protection. So, by putting this under a specific chapter, it clarifies it a little bit.
Clarifies what it is.
In terms of what was your guidelines in kind of making this decision, Drew? Because, we started doing more maintenance stuff. We're starting to invest in it. I mean, you can presumably say this for any green space. And I guess this one's a little bit different because it's, in a designated city square. But, I mean, was there like a specific rubric you had to, consider, or was it just something that it made sense to do.
Yeah, it just makes sense. I think that if you observe, I mean, I would encourage you to do so as you leave the building today.
Yeah.
Observe the usage of the plaza. It has increased significantly just in the last 4 months. And a lot of
that's
that
going to-
credit is due to the library, but also to the Public Works Department, who has taken my charge seriously of making the city square a showpiece in the city.
Absolutely.
And as more and more people use it outside of what I would consider customary use, meaning sitting out there during the day between visits to the library, but now we're seeing people picnicking on both lawns and enjoying the fountain. We're about to add more furniture out there. I think it's important that we be able to regulate it, not just during the hours that people are in these buildings, but in the off hours too, just like we would a park.
Yeah, and all that notwithstanding, I just wanted to commend, just the fact that it's being used a lot more. It's activating that space. It's very consistent with the council's GIOs, so I commend it, but just figured I'd throw that question.
And the more activities that occur in spaces, some organized and some just organic,
Yeah.
more potential there is for conflict to occur. And so having one area responsible for making sure it's all coordinated, I think can be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed.
The only thing I was going to say to that point is, so there will be like one booking agent, if you will, if someone wants to have something on the city square, will they go to Parks to, if they want to reserve it, or?
No, there's not going to be any change in the operating of the space. So at this moment, we still have some concern over who's booking what when, because the library is programming the space pretty actively, and people are booking things like birthday parties through the library that are supported by the library during the day hours. And then, like, the library has just started programming every Thursday. There's a musician that sits out there and plays some music.
What time?
But then there's also, I've forgotten the times. There's also the city manager's process, which is actually the next item on the agenda, that allows for special events to be issued, permits to be issued for the space. And so we're working through that conflict that can occur between the library's programming of the space and someone who has permitted a use of it that may not like the fact that they're sharing the space with a children's birthday party.
And vice versa.
And vice versa.
Well, I think it's important to have a name to sort of define the space, because just like what you said up here, when I tell people, for instance, when the scrumptious is going on, it's like, well, that green space that's up there next to the library and between this building and that building. So I think it's important to have a name, so.
No questions.
Well, I have a motion, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council approve Resolution 19-13 as drafted.
Second.
Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
The next item under new business is the consideration and approval of Proposed Ordinance 19-15, amending Section 9-36 of the City Code to designate City Square as an area for which the city manager may issue short-term special event permits.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This item is obviously a follow-up to the last. So now that we've officially made City Square a public park, all this does is clean up the section of City Code that allows the city manager to issue special event permits for that space now known as City Square.
Do I hear a motion?
I move that City Council adopt ordinance number 19-15 as drafted.
Second.
Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
And the last item of new business on our agenda is the authorization for the Williamsburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority to administer the workforce housing program at all properties designated by the city manager. Mr. Trivette?
Yes, Mayor. So earlier this week, the Housing Authority met and constituted a workforce housing program that will be administered by the authority. And what we're asking for here is the ability to enroll city-owned houses in that program. As you all know, we have operated a sort of an informal workforce housing program for years under the auspices of the Public Works Department, who's done an outstanding job of moving people in and moving people out. And now we want to sort of formalize that process under the Housing Authority, which is well equipped to administer housing programs. The critical question here is, how will this impact existing residents? And we're doing our best to make sure that it doesn't in any significant way. But they are transitioning in the future to be a managed program with specific leases and defined rents in a way that we're not currently doing.
And so just for clarification, we're taking existing city assets that are used for this purpose and putting them into a more formalized structure under the guidance auspices of the Housing Authority, and these houses will continue to be leased to city employees.
That's right. These houses will only be available to city employees. Mr. Franklin and his staff have come up with an excellent process for sort of having an application process that will consider things like on-call status as well as need, which I think is important. So we think this is a good step forward. The city currently has 5 houses that are involved in this program, and I think 2 of those are vacant, if I'm not mistaken. And so while the majority of the housing is occupied, there are 2 that are not occupied, and at least one of those has never been in the workforce housing program. So there is at least 1 new addition.
And I happened to catch some of that discussion on Monday, and I thought it went very well. Any questions?
No questions. Yeah.
No questions?
No, I feel that we discussed it well on Monday and that this is the right move for it.
To me, it's a case of having the right people, use their resources at the Housing Authority who understand Fair Housing Acts, leasing. Let them manage this program is the most efficient and probably legally the best, safest way to do it.
And as we continue with this city council, continue to explore and determine, future policies with regard to workforce housing and affordable housing, we can look to this formal structure as maybe a guidance moving forward. And what a great mission to be able to house some of our own city employees who may otherwise not be able to afford living in this area. So thank you very much, Mr. Franklin, for your efforts. And Mr. Trivette.
And Mr. Clayton.
And Mr. Clayton.
Do I hear a motion?
I move that City Council authorize the WRHA to administer the workforce housing program at all properties designated by the city manager.
Second.
Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
I have one other item of new business to bring up. We have now a very nice asset in our Parks and Recreation Department out in front of this building, and we have another very nice asset just to the east of that, City Square and the Community Building. And they're lovely and very purposeful, but the names are a little less than inspiring and may not give as much of a sense of place as a different name could. And so in talking to my colleagues, I think we have some consensus individually, I've spoken to them, that we ask staff to consider a process to develop a new naming convention for each of those spaces, either individually or combined. I welcome any thoughts or comments.
No, you're absolutely right. Giving it a better name than the community building will give it a greater sense of place for people to rent it for weddings and that type of thing. So I think it's a process that's long overdue. And I do think it's a good charge for us to have staff kind of look at other processes around the community, around the country rather, as how is the best way to go about naming a building, because there's lots of concerns, obvious concerns about naming it after people, and so I look forward to getting some sort of recommendation from staff that we all can then create a process, and then I'll go out and deploy whatever that process ends up being.
I echo that because, even on top of some concerns when you completely leave it up, I think about the episode from Parks and Recreation where they try to rename a park and all these folks start flooding in some of the inappropriate names, and that ended up getting more of the votes because obviously people find that funny. But if there's some sort of regulated process where folks who truly think that some sort of name ought to be bestowed upon our great parks, or the space over there, I'd be curious to see what your process will be for that.
Well, and I think it's important too to try and identify it as something that's a little bit more representative and indicative and unique to Williamsburg. When someone says the Common, they instantly think of Boston. It'd be nice for us to have something that said, oh, that's Williamsburg. So I'm in favor of it
Have you
as well.
talked to Barbara about maybe naming rights? Is there money attached to this?
Ted, we're all ears if you've got the cash.
And staff will probably look at, naming rights based on, somebody buying it. Pizza Center.
And aside from any kind of sponsorship opportunity that might be available, I think we'd all agree that the more public input we get on this, the better.
And I think that would be a fun process.
Yes.
Yeah, they're really wonderful.
Was that fun or fund?
Do you need any more direction, Mr. Trivette?
No, I think I've got some, we've actually been talking about this as a staff already, what policy we might put in place, so we're anxious to get started.
We don't need to vote on this, okay. That's the conclusion of our new business. It takes us to open forum. If anybody would like to address council on any matter, we welcome you to come forward. Please state your name and address, and if you could keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, we would appreciate that. Mr. Braxton, would you like? Thank you, sir. Seeing no one else, we'll close the open forum. Do we have any items for closed session?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
Ms. Burcham?
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Zhang?
All right.
We're adjourned.